Hello, everyone. Gordon Causey again. Coming right now, it is the 11th of October, 11:51 p.m. A little late starting. I wanted to start at 11:45, but as always, life happens. This is a crappy, pathetic, miserable little YouTube channel, non-monetized. Just me shaking my fist at the cloud, as it were. Shake, lay down, speak. Speak. There we go. And Candy, if I don't give her a treat at the start of the video, she jumps all over me. So I have to. That or I have to put her in a crate. And I don't like doing that. So we're going to be talking more about what's happening now in Israel. And boy, oh boy. I'll address one of the first things. But before I get going, you know the drill. Like, share, subscribes. My last video that I did 2 days ago, a day and a half ago, on this subject, talking about Israel, taking something of a deep dive into a lot of the history. That video, wow, eyebrows shot right up when I looked this afternoon and saw that it had been viewed over 1,000 times. Normally, my miserable, pathetic little videos get 25, 30, maybe 40, 50 views. The odd one here and there might go over 100. I guess if the topic is particularly engaging. I'm assuming, though, that most people who watched it only didn't stay on for long. The watch time is relatively low, but I did garner 7 or 8 new subscribers. So some people obviously are enjoying the content, and that I appreciate people subscribing to the channel. But anyway, I wanted to talk about these reports that are coming out about beheadings. The story has come out. You probably heard about it. There have been reports that officials, soldiers, that they've gone into a kibbutz in Israel and found infants, babies who have been beheaded. And if you're not familiar, a kibbutz is basically, it's almost like a commune. It's a little self-sustaining community in Israel, and there are a number of kibbutzes across Israel, almost like a little commune is probably the best word to describe it. They grow their own food, they have their own doctors most times, their own schools, and it's like an autonomous little community. And they exist within Israel, kibbutzes. And so the reports have come out that at one particular kibbutz, they found babies or infants, toddlers, whatever, beheaded. And I've heard it suggested that to be skeptical about those reports, I've seen accusations. People have been accused of being anti-Semitic for daring to question the validity of these reports. I am not anti-Semitic at all. But at the same time, as I referenced in my last video, the first casualty of war is truth. And there is a long history of something referred to as atrocity propaganda in warfare. Atrocity propaganda is de rigueur. You should almost expect it. And it is what atrocity propaganda is, exactly what it says it is. Basically, in times of war, the enemy is vilified and is accused of perpetrating atrocities, horrific acts. If I go back to World War I, the Western media accused the German soldiery of horrible acts of violence against Belgian children, or cutting off their hands. And that's, it was in World War I that they started to refer to the Germans as the Huns, conjuring up images of Attila the Hun. And this is normal. This is, would be nice to live in a world where there was no war, but if there's going to be war, then there's going to be atrocity propaganda. A more recent example would be during when Iraq invaded Kuwait. This is the second. There was a second Gulf War when George W. Bush was president around 2004 or five. This war, the first Persian Gulf War, took place when George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush's father. Be nice if they had different names, but it is what it is. So when George H.W. Bush, George Bush the Elder, was president, he was president from 1988 to 1992. Sometime in around 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and they held a joint session of Congress. And young Kuwaiti, this joint session of the House of Representatives and the Senate was presented with a young Kuwaiti girl, 12, 13 years old, and she addressed this joint session and told everyone in attendance and the world, because it was televised, that Iraq's soldiers were throwing babies out of incubators. And that helped build support for a war to liberate Kuwait. Prior to this revelation, prior to this story about Iraqi soldiers tossing babies out of incubators, support had been diminished. There was a lot of opposition to the war, to a war to liberate Kuwait, and a lot of it revolved around the rhetoric that was being used. One of the first lines that was used to get people to support a war and going in and liberating Kuwait, they said, "Well, we're fighting for democracy," but people said, "Well, wait a minute. Kuwait isn't a democracy; it is an emirate state. It's ruled by a royal family. So we're not fighting for democracy because Kuwait isn't a democracy." Then another line they used was that Saddam Hussein and his Republican Guard army represented a major threat to world peace and security. But that was shot down quickly because people looked and said, well, wait a minute, they took on Iran. There was a war that went on for 5+ years between Iraq and Iraq couldn't even defeat Iran. That war ended up as a basic stalemate. So it couldn't even defeat a regional power. And this is Iraq and Saddam Hussein are a major threat to world peace and security. Come on, that doesn't, you're exaggerating on steroids. And then they came out with this Iraq's soldiers throwing babies out of incubators, and that resonated with people. I mean, it pulls on the emotional heartstrings, much in the same way that reports of Hamas, call them whatever you want, of Hamas militants beheading infants on a kibbutz. It tugs at the heartstrings. However, it should be noted, it later came out, it was later revealed that story about Iraq soldiers throwing babies out of incubators was a fabrication. It was the creation of a PR agency that had been engaged by the George H.W. Bush administration to sell the war, and that the young Kuwaiti girl, presented as just some young Kuwaiti citizen, young Kuwaiti girl, as it turned out, she was a member of the Kuwaiti royal family. She was not just some random girl who just happened to be in a hospital witnessing this. She was actually a member of the royal family, and it's widely recognized by everyone from Amnesty International and everywhere else that it was atrocity propaganda. Now, am I saying that atrocities don't take place in warfare? No, they do. Atrocities do take place at times of war. All I am saying is it is okay to be skeptical. It is okay to have doubts. It's okay to question. We don't know. We don't know. There's a video that gets circulated every now and again, and I should have linked it below. I didn't, but if anyone wants to see it, leave a comment down below and I'll be glad to share it with you. It's here on YouTube, Video FX, and it shows you how a young child little toddler, 2, 3 years old, is walking along an embankment, basically a straight drop into a hydroelectric facility, and he's on the other side of this fence, just stumbling along, and one wrong step, and it looks like he could plummet hundreds of feet down into a hydroelectric facility, into a river with turbines and whatever. And if you take it at face value, wow, that's alarming. Oh my gosh, where are the kids' parents, et cetera, et cetera. But then they show you how it was done. And how it was done is they basically took, it was a kid walking along the curb with a parking lot. There's a parking lot, but they digitally remove the parking lot, put that, a green background in it, and then they swap in images of a hydroelectric facility and totally alter what you're seeing. There is an old bromide, an old saying that predates our modern era. And I may not have it perfectly right, but it goes something to the effect of, at times of war, believe only half of what you read, and 50% or nothing of what you hear by word of mouth. So don't believe any of the rumors and only believe half of what you read in the paper. Nowadays, with digital technology, if you're seeing something, a video of something, you can't even be sure it's real. I would encourage anyone, almost as a tutorial on how war can be manipulated, watch that old 1997 movie, Wag the Dog, with Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Woody Harrelson, Willie Nelson, Dennis Leary, star-studded cast in this movie. And there they fabricated a war with the United States fabricated a war with Albania. And you'll see how they created a video image back then in 1997, more than a quarter century ago, of a girl said to be fleeing Albanian terrorists. And she was holding a bag of Tostillos or something, which was later they digitally turned into a cat. And she just ran across that green screen type thing, and then they superimposed everything. And then next thing you know, it's on the nightly news. Obviously, that's Hollywood, but art reflects life. It works both ways. Life reflects art, and sometimes art you get the point. So this is going to drag on and on and on. We've already got Hezbollah in Lebanon. There's talk of them. This idea of a second front opening up. And more importantly, as to just getting back to my last video and talking about dominoes falling, and I exemplified World War I, where all the alliances started to come into play. It strikes me that Israel, is joined at the hip with the United States of America, which is the declining world power, whereas other nations are aligning themselves now with China, which is the power on the rise. And I was watching a video of Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, on September 22nd of this year, addressing the United Nations General Assembly, just 15 days prior to this attack by Hamas. And you can search it out on here, just write Benjamin Netanyahu, UN, September 22nd, 2023. You can find his address. And he was promising an unprecedented, unheralded age of peace and prosperity for the Middle East, that they were going to create a corridor which would allow things, communication, energy pipelines, trade routes, across the Indian Ocean into Saudi Arabia, from Saudi Arabia in through the Levant, up through Israel, and on into Europe. And he seemed to be relying heavily on the influence of the United States of America in the Middle East. And as referenced in my last video, And Candy's just going nuts. She's got a hold of something. She always does. Lay down, sit down, and be quiet. As I referenced in my last video, Saudi Arabia just normalized its relations within the last year or so with Jordan. They shut down all their diplomatic relations, and they were able to reestablish diplomatic relations with Jordan. However, it was not the United States which brokered that deal. It was China. China has become the new kingmaker for a lot of countries. Africa has recognized that China is the ascending power. A lot of African nations have recognized China as the ascending power. Saudi Arabia is sitting down with the Jordanians, with China brokering their rapprochement of diplomatic relations. I mean, this is significant because in terms of condemning the attacks on Israel, Saudi Arabia has not, as near as I have seen, all they've done is to call for restraint and for an end, a cessation of hostilities. They have not condemned the attack. That by not condemning it, that is tacitly giving justification for it. Likewise, Russia has not. And this is where the dominoes come in, because Saudi Arabia, are they cozying up to China? Quite possibly. When then you look at Russia. Russia has not condemned the attack either, and they're closely allied with Iran. Iran is widely believed to be the main backers of Hamas in the West Bank and Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is getting messy. Ukraine, I think of the Russian-Ukrainian war, which has been going on since 2014, which is when the Russians annexed the Crimean Peninsula, when Russia retook Crimea from Ukraine. That was the start of the so-called Ukrainian-Russian war, or Russian-Ukrainian war. And then it ramped up in 2022, I think it was February 2022, so more than a year and a half ago. That's when the current iteration of that war came, with Russian sending an invasion force down, and now it's a year and a half later. It's still dragging on. Well, I think we're going to be taught a year and a half from now. I expect that this conflict between Israel and goodness knows who, right now, it's Israel and Hamas. Hezbollah looks like they're getting involved. Will Iran be dragged in eventually? Iran is allied with Russia. Russia has a no limits partnership with China. This is going to go on and on and on. I'm not going to, though. My last video was too long. I'll keep this one under 20 minutes. So God bless. Thank you for watching. We'll see what happens. I think, I'm going to go on a little bit longer because I want to talk about Israel's right to exist. I put that down in the description. Does Israel have the right to exist? And I think there's a lot of sucking and blowing that goes on by individuals who support the Palestinian cause. And what they have to acknowledge is that they're denying Israel's right to exist. Much the same way that Iran denies Israel's right to exist. Iran, since their Islamic revolution in 1979, when the Shah of Iran was kicked out, and at that time it was the Ayatollah Khomeini who became kind of the spiritual leader. Iran is something of a theocracy, an Islamic theocracy. And since 1979 to this day, Iran has refused to recognize the legitimacy of the Israeli state, in similar fashion to the way that the Chinese refused to recognize the legitimacy of Taiwan as an autonomous state. That's the way Tehran And the Iranians view Israel. It's not legitimate. And it gets back to my thesis statement of yesterday. So long as a two-state solution is simply unworkable, because both we're dealing with territory that both Palestinians and Israelis claim as their own. And there's no workable solution. The only thing that can happen is eventually one side has to win and the other side has to lose. Otherwise, we go back to what has existed since 1948, which is this, powder keg that just blows up every few years. Every few years, there's going to be violence. And eventually, you know, there's no solution to this. The only solution is one side it's winner take all. One side has to win and the other side has to lose. You look at the Temple Mount, you look at Jerusalem, talk about a contentious piece of real estate. This Dome of the Rock and the mosque attached to it is considered obviously sacred to the Jews because it is the site of the first and second temple. But it's equally sacred to Islam. They consider it the third most holy site in Islam. And neither, the Muslims regard Jewish worship on the Temple Mount as a desecration of a holy Islamic site. You've got a site that's holy to two different religions. And neither side will give any quarter. There's no compromise. There's no workable compromise here. We're dealing with stuff that goes back millennia. If you believe that Israel has the right to exist, well, then there's only one outcome. And if you believe that Israel does not have a right to exist, there's only one outcome. The outcome is either way. It's the elimination of one and the establishment of one as the primary and sole survivor. It's a winner take all. Anyway, I'll still keep it under 25 minutes. God bless. If you like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Appreciate it. And we will talk to you later.